Good afternoon, everyone. I will try to speak slowly for all of you who are so good to understand English because my German is non-existent. I believe, though, my speech has been translated for you into German, and as a result of that, I will try and stick mainly to the text, although I am known to stray a little. Minister for Social Affairs, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure for me to return and speak to you here this afternoon. I did have the pleasure of coming to Austria as the President in 2012, and it was just as I commenced my presidency for EUSE. And at that stage, you were celebrating 10 years, and my abiding memory are balloons everywhere saying 10 years of dabei. So it is wonderful to return and reflect with you what has been achieved both in Austria and now in the wider EUSE, and to look ahead to the challenges we all face. A little bit of information around EUSE first. As the President, I have had the privilege of leading an organisation of very dedicated professionals for the past 5 years, and all of these people are volunteers. EUSE is a network of organisations, and it's now approaching its 25th birthday. So we have grown too. We now have 21 member countries. We have developed values, toolkits. In fact, the latest toolkit for diversity was launched here in this very room. We have tried to increase the professionalism across Europe with the promotion of supported employment. Currently, we're working on a new quality agenda through a project called SEQF, Supported Employment Quality Framework, and hopefully you will hear more about that in the coming months. And also a second project which is looking at the skills of professionals working with young entrepreneurs who require support into the workplace. Recently, and I'm delighted he's here today, we have signed a partnership agreement with the EASPD, and we've also entered into a working relationship with EDF. So look, our work has begun, and I think we have much ahead. The first, not to be underestimated, is the first ever World Conference on Supported Employment, Employment for All, and it's in partnership with the ASPD and the World Association of Supported Employment, to be held in my beloved Belfast on June the 14th to 16th this year, and I hope to see many of you there. Enough about EUSE. What about supported employment itself? Well, sometimes for me it feels that the pathway to recognition and equality for supported employment is a continuous moving platform and not always in the right way. Supported employment continues to face funding issues across Europe in many member states where segregated services are receiving the lion's share, the most of the monies available. Supported employment is not new, not rocket science. Put simply, it's a 5-stage method that ensures the inclusion of disabled and disadvantaged people in the open labour market, a key tenet of the UNCRPD. However, as recently stated by one of my vice presidents, Luke Henna, it also needs to be a state of mind. It's a passion to include those far from the labour market. I'll talk about that phrase, far from the labour market, in a moment. EUSE has had a really strong working relationship with Austria over the past number of years, and there are a few people I would like to thank. Marlene Mayfair, Ute Fragner, and not forgetting your current representative, Marcus Newhers. I'm sure I've got all those names incorrect in the pronunciation, but it is heartfelt, my thanks. Your representatives have always been at the forefront of assisting in the development of the European Union of Supported Employment. Materials and products from the original toolkit to the recent position paper on the UNCRPD. The professionalism and dedication of your representatives are of an extremely high standard, and the desire of many other member states who belong to EUSE. But Austria's support goes much beyond your council representation, with Dr. Marco Nicolosi and the many other delegates who have attended and presented workshops at the EUSE conferences over the past years. Now, this isn't in the written piece of paper or my speech, but it also is still the same today, because I can tell you that with the call for papers for the conference in Belfast, Austria had one of the highest number of papers put forward. And again, I also would be aware in the Employment for All Awards, many Austrian applications. So I wish you all well in either speaking or winning an Employment for All. Without this continuous support from Austria, the work of EUSE would not be as robust or indeed as far developed as it currently is. And I'd like to throw something out, as they say in my language. I'd like to encourage Austria Council to think of not just being council members in EUSE with the upcoming elections, but maybe to look at could you fill a role of an officer. Supported employment, as I've previously mentioned, is coming 25 years old. We initially embraced this model for people with complex disabilities. But as the years have passed, the model has been seen as a great tool and successful tool and intervention for other groups of unemployed, disadvantaged people. Austria, in fact, has developed one of the most successful working models in applying this to young people, as we would refer sometimes to as NEETs, not in employment, education or training. This should be seen as a great way to ensure the integration into the employment market of a young group identified across Europe as finding a lot of difficulties since the economic crisis we have all experienced. I would, however, put a note of caution in that we should not forget the client groups that this model was initially developed for. That is, people with disabilities and people with complex needs. In many member states, our laws on disability pensions see that the disabled people are not viable to work. This is contra to the values and beliefs of supported employment, and indeed to Article 27, already mentioned here, of the UNCRPD, which states, parties recognise the rights of persons with disabilities to work in an equal basis with others. This includes the right to the opportunity to gain a living by work freely chosen or accepted in a labour market and work environment that is open, inclusive and accessible to persons with disabilities. Also, EUSE's values state zero rejection, and we believe that anyone who wants to work can work as long as they're provided with the correct support. If we all as member states are truly meeting the core values of this article and the zero rejection policy of EUSE, we must believe that everyone who wants to work can work, and we must provide the correct level of support. No one said it would be easy, but it is the right of every disabled person to have the opportunity to work in the open labour market and not to be labelled as unable to work. The rights of the individual should be paramount, and therefore it is imperative that all of us as professionals and member states provide pathways to employment for all disabled persons who choose the right to work. As I mentioned previously, the supported employment is for those disabled people often referred to as far from the labour market. But an esteemed colleague of mine at a meeting recently challenged me, and now I'll challenge you. Are the people far from the labour market? Or is the labour market far from the people? And what do we need to do to change that? And that esteemed colleague is Mr. Luc Zelderloo, sitting over here, who I did not know was coming today, but I had included in my speech. As a result of this, I think we've still a lot of work to do with employers to ensure that we have accessible opportunities within the companies they represent for those to date have not had work opportunities in the local labour market. Do not let us forget that in work accessibility, the word accessible means more than a physical environment, but that of a true cultural change to meet the disability community at its point of need. We are talking sensory changes, language changes, job description changes, naming but a few. So whilst we all say, well done for the road travelled so far, let us be mindful of the continued challenges facing the wider European community in the months and years ahead. I think it'd be fair to say we're all feeling the winds of change from the general population, and we have a period of instability. And during this period of instability across Europe, it is integral that we here today, each and every one of us, make sure that disabled people and those from the disadvantaged community are not forgotten. EU 2020 attempted to improve the opportunities for people with disabilities, but the figures of people with disabilities in employment remain at a lower level now than we started out. And that doesn't include those hidden from the statistics because they're economically inactive, not unemployed. Why? Why is this the case? Well, I would challenge us to think we're putting in the same inputs, so we're going to get the same outputs. We need to change. We need to think about how we can do things differently. If we as a continent do not change our ways with the work with people with disabilities and continue to only offer services, we will not succeed. We need to transform segregated environments, not in 10 years' time, but now. Transformational change is required. It will not be easy, but this all needs to happen to ensure the rights of people are obtained. I was at a conference in Washington in December, and it's not often I go outside Europe, but I was challenged there we as delegates were asked, what can you do? What can you do to change the needle? What can you do to ensure that people with disability get higher numbers in the employment market? Some of the things we're saying, governments, you need to change. You need to change your policies to ensure people with disabilities are included at all levels. Providers of programmes, if we continue to provide services instead of working with and for people with disabilities, that's what we need to embrace. No longer will we provide a service. We need to work with and for the people with disabilities. Disabled people, they need to demand their rights. And I think if we all work together, co-designing new ways of inclusive opportunities, one person at a time, one job at a time, supported employment tool will help us get there. So, I think I hopefully have given you some things to think about. And this conversation, I would like to turn into a debate, but not today, unfortunately, because of time. But I would invite you to come to the First World Conference on Supported Employment for All, a global perspective, being held in Belfast. I invite you to try and come and hear of the successes and challenges within and beyond Europe. I know that Austria will once again be a key linchpin in the participation and organisation of this great event. We've been delighted to receive the interest from all in Austria to date and encourage you all to come and participate. Numbers to the conference are limited, and I can tell you we have in excess of 300 already booked. So if you have not booked your place, I would appeal that you book quickly so that you are not disappointed. Finally, once again, congratulations to all here in Austria on the achievements, and happy birthday. We hope EUSC and Austria will continue to be active partners with a positive influence on the work of EUSC in the future. You have so much to offer. Thank you.